NRL Supercoaches, we are going through the Roosters, the Panthers, the Broncos, and the Tigers. And their draws are very, very similar to each other. That's why they are paired in this one here. And in our last video, we went through the Titans, Storm, Dragons, and Cows. They had the early bye. They missed that first big bye. Whereas these guys, you get all the way through until round 10 for the Roosters, 11 for the Panthers, and then it's round 12 for Broncos and Tigers before they have any byes at all. So with Roosters and Panthers, it's slightly different to the other two because they do end up playing that first and second major, first major bye and the first minor bye. Whereas the Broncos and the Tigers both miss round 12 and 15, respectively. You do get a little bit more benefit, in my opinion, out of the Roosters and the Panthers because if they are a non-origin guy, that's going to be helpful in those rounds there. If they are an origin guy, it makes it a lot tougher there. If you're a Rooster, they miss 10, 12, 14, 17. If they're a Panther, they miss 11, 12, 15, and 18 there. So 4 in a matter of sort of 8 weeks there, which can be pretty tough. So that's something you do need to think about. But if they are an origin guy, you get them all the way through until either round 10, 11, or 12, which is great. And that's the big focus for this video, is going through each of the different positions and finding out which one of those guys you could hold in your team from round 1 at least until their first bye, which comes later on, compared to round 1, 2, 3, or 7 in the video that we had a couple of days ago. So with the hooking position, it's pretty great because you can sell all of them basically at origin time, or if they are a non-origin guy in the Roosters or Panthers, you could keep hold of them through that period. So if, Connor Watson, for example, is going to be the first guy on our list there from a Roosters perspective. If he doesn't make origin, then he's going to be set up really, really nicely for you with that team. There's also another bunch of teams, guys, that have a pretty good situation there in the Dolphins, Sharks, Raiders, and Bunnies. So if you're looking at any players from those teams and in those positions when I'm going through these guys, that is something to think about as well. And then you have the other grouping is Knights, Warriors, Dogs, Eels, and Manly. They have a bye fairly early. So you're really looking at this bottom section, the one we're going through now, and then the Dolphins, Sharks, Raiders, and Bunnies. If you're looking for a guy that you can hold all the way up and through to Origin, this is where you want to be focusing and targeting. So really, it is in the hooking position, only Appy and Connor Watson at the higher price that you'd probably want to have a look at, and you can hold them through that period of time, which is great. Last year, you had Appy with a buy in round 1, so that wasn't super ideal, but he was a little bit cheaper than where he's currently at. Blake Moser might be in your plans if he gets the bench or the starting spot to begin the year, and then Sandon Smith. So there's a few guys in the hooking position, Sandon and Connor, both having duels, which is great. But if you do want to use them just in a hooking position, then there's plenty you do need to think about. But the good thing with these guys is the fact that you get them through a very long period of the first big, part of the season, and you can make decisions from that once they've either made their cash, or if they're a keeper, can you hold them through all of their buys that are in a quick succession there? Especially with Connor, if he's going to be making origin like he did last year, it could be hard to hold someone like that, especially through all of their missing it's going to be 10, 14, 17. That can make it pretty tough to add in 12, 15, 18 as well if he's in origin. So he might be one that you just use for the first half of the season, then you pivot to a different guy there. Because the biggest thing that can help you win NRL Supercoach is just being able to conserve trades in certain positions and use trades in those real upside positions. And that's where someone like Connor, using him for the first 2.5 months of the season, could be really beneficial. And there will be other guys in that other section that I mentioned that could do that job as well. So from a front row forward perspective there, with these guys, it's going to be pretty cool to have 1 or 2 guns in your side that can last a test of time in this position, and you can hold them for a good portion of the year. And that's where, guys like Payne Haas and Terrell May come into the fold here. 669 and 597, both guys that are heavily on my radar from a Supercoach perspective, and both those guys can do a cracking job. And with the Broncos being able to get through all the way until the first major bye, That's invaluable for someone like Payne Haas, who we know is super consistent and can hit around that 70 mark on a regular basis. Terrell May, we're probably expecting him to go up a level into that 65 to 70 range at 597. He's going to be on the fringes of Origin, but if he does miss that, then he's someone that can become really important for your side as well. If you do want to go a little bit cheaper, guys like Lindsay Smith, I think could do a really good job. Liam Henry, these types of guys, you know that they're going to get pretty solid minutes now with Fisher Harris gone. And do you just plug someone in at 450 or 520 and get really, really nice, consistent scoring? And you're getting them all the way through to round 11. You know that if they don't make Origin, which Lindsay Smith's just played for Australia, if he doesn't make Origin, he is perfect for that round 12 and 13 as well. So that's something interesting. You know, get a guy that doesn't really get injured. That could just be a consistent plug in your side for that time. Moving down the line, Nafahu White comes to mind at 367. Very, very interesting with the dual position. If he gets that 13 role, even if he doesn't, I think that minutes are on the increase for him and hopefully some more consistency, because he was great in stretches and he was pretty poor in other stretches as well. And then moving down to some of the cheapies, we'll have to see what happens in the preseason. For the two RFs, it's just, as you can see with my notes here, it's the front row forward position is great for stability early, with it being a 4-player position. With the 2RF, it's great for the start in general, just because you get guys that you can lock in, especially those in the gun category, which, you know, we're looking up top here with a few guys that you could be selecting in your sides, and it just locks them in that second row forward position. And if you've got guys that are on the fringes of starting or bench guys, and you're just worried that they're not going to score perfectly every week, consistently every week, which is likely going to be the case for guys in that 3 to 500k range, as the consistency is probably not there, and that's why they're priced down at that level. Is that, you know, we're going to get from these guys, some weeks you might have to play that 3 to 500k guy if your player had a bye in this position or a concussion or whatever it is, and you could get unlucky. You could get lucky, obviously, and pick up a 75 with the try or something like that, but you could pick up a 25, and it just cooks you in those certain weeks, especially early on. So that's where the consistency of guys that don't have a bye comes into play. In that scenario, you can at least hold them all the way through to that section in the middle, especially if they're an Origin guy and you're probably moving them on from there anyway. The reason you might look to select someone in these top section that I mentioned here, Titans, Storm, Dragons, Cowboys, is that you get a little bit of a spread out of the buys. With the Cowboys, they're 7, 12, and 27. So in that case, you've got someone, if you grab them from the start, you've then got them for the majority of that buy period, even though they missed round 12. Whereas these guys in this section here that we're talking about, they're missing a host of games through the buy period. So if you went for a lot of people from this section, you're then going to have to trade a bunch through that period anyway. Whereas if you stagger it out with, as I said, 1 to 2 max for each of those teams in that first section, let's just say you had one in each team, they're going to be helpful for you, not in round 12, but in a lot of the other rounds through that buy period. So if you're selecting a bunch from each of the 4 sections, that's where it can help you out. Just with not, looking at one of the buy rounds and going, oh crap, I've got 6 players only, and then in this other round I've got 15 already. It's just going to stagger that out a bit, and you don't have to stress too much about overloading on your trades through that section or using a boost through that section, because you are pretty close to that 12 to 13 number on a regular basis there. Especially now that we'll have 26 players, I think it'll be even easier to navigate the buy period there. But in the 2RF section there, you've got Crichton, Yo, who really stand out as clear gun options to begin the year. You get a lot of time of no buys in your team, and the consistency is there, especially from Yo. More up and down from Crichton, but has more upside. Carrigan will be interesting. Get a lot of time with Haas injured, so I think price-wise, I think he's about on par or a little bit above. Isaiah Papali'i's going to be a fun one at 585, so keep an eye out on where he does end up in their side, if he's on the edge or if he's in the middle. You've got guys like Samuel Fainu, you've got Scott Sorensen, who will have a little bit of potential value there. Fainu, if he takes a step up with Tigers improving, and then Sorensen, a lot of injuries last year after a really, really good season the year prior. And then moving down the line, it's wild that Liam Martin is so low, but it's just how it is. You got Alex Seyfarth at 435, that if he gets that edge spot, we know that he can score better than his 44 average pricing. And then you have guys like Jack Bird, Brendan Piakura, all solid options at for different people, depending on your your tolerance for downside risk and missed tackles and head knocks and injuries with Jack Bird, all these types of things there as well. So there's plenty at all different prices in the second row forward position for these teams, which is great. Moving to the halfback position, you do have to be a little bit more selective in the four positions that only have two players, in the halves, the 5/8, the fullback, and the hooking position. And this is where if Cleary is fit and firing for round one, it's going to be very hard not to select him, given he has that terrific draw to begin things. You can move him on around Origin time if it got to that point. But you've got him at 8'11", you've got Jerome Luai, the dual position, so him at 5/8 or halfback, which is good. And then moving on from there, there's a few guys that you could look at, but Reynolds will have Ben Hunt now. Santa Smith's at that cheaper price as well. So in just these teams alone, there's only really three guys that you could probably select in Cleary, Luai, and Santa Smith. And that just shows it's hard to find guys that are going to be high quality enough for you that don't have buys early or don't have strange schedules. So that's where Cleary, his value lies. Obviously the upside, but him in that position, not having an early buy, which he usually does, so that's massive. In the 5/8 position, same thing as we said. You're looking at Luai again, you're looking at Galvin. Hunt at 603 with Reynolds, probably no. But you've got Blaze telling he's going to be fun at 562. If he gets that sixth position at the Panthers, it does feel a little bit expensive, just with, unfortunately having too good of a season last year in his time when he got out there. Adam Doueihi at 431, likely gets the goal kicking. He becomes a little bit interesting if the team starts to play well. And he can be involved in kicking more goals, but also in try scoring and assisting. So there are a few guys there in that 5/8 position that have potentially a bit of value for you there. Center wing, it's just great to lock in guys, especially in the gun category that do have no buys in that first sort of 10 to 12 weeks, which is awesome. So Dom Young comes in at 701k. He's not clearly on my radar at the moment, as you would have seen in my target list. But guys like Brian To'o get a nice run, Daniel Tupou. You've got a few of these Roosters there that are at high price, but do they improve this year or do they fall off a little bit? You got Paul Alamotti, who really came into his own last year at 585. Junior Pauga at 8 games for a nice 62 average was impressive. But yeah, Taruva comes over to the Tigers. I do think Alamotti probably steps up a little bit. He could get into the 60s on that left-hand side, which is funny because Taylor May couldn't get anywhere near a 59 average there. Selwyn Cobbo had a bit of a down year in my opinion. Him and Dean Mara, I think, can probably improve on that as well a little bit, but I think Cobbo has that bit more upside. And you've got Isaac Tungo at 501k, so there's just a lot of guys here. Jarrell Skelton, Casey McLean, Nwanga... I'm still trying to work it out. Nwanga Nitawazi. There we go. Nwanga Nitawazi. Getting there. I'll just say it probably, I think, 20 times before I get that one. Casey, Mark, Adam Doueihi, as we said, got that dual position with the center wing. Jack Bird. Jesse Arthurs again at the cheap price if Broncos start to play better. Billy Smith at 317. So there are lots of guys here. Stafford Toa at 288. Jesse McLean if he gets an opportunity. So center wing is... it just has a lot of options out of these four teams, and you know that you're going to get them for a long period of time before they will need to be sold coming into the Origin period. And then you got three guns here in the fullback slot from these teams, which is great. You don't have to worry about their buys in the early period. Tedesco, highest priced and highest scorer in the game last year, scored 2,068 points, which is wild. Edwards averaged 8.3 points less than him, and he scored 611 points less, which is crazy on a total season number. But if Cleary's not right, he could be interesting. Walsh at 738, if the Broncos improve, he could be interesting. Or if Reynolds was to be out and goal kicking would be in his lap, would be cool as well. So they're the three guys to have a look at. And if we did have any problems with Edwards, we might see Laurie at the back, who was absolutely dominant through his time at fullback. So that's that section, guys. There's probably a few more options in that spot, in those four teams, than there was in the Titans, Storm, Dragons, and Cowboys, and probably makes sense. Obviously, you've got four really interesting, strong teams, if you can say that about the Tigers. They come in fourth on that list. Broncos just not performing well, but have a lot of stars and have the ability to do really well. And if you wanted to take that plunge, they could. And then the Tigers side of things, with a rebuilding roster and an improved roster, they have some interesting picks as well, with some spots opening up with Bateman, Papali'i going away, and some a new half, new outside backs. There's a fair bit going on at that club. And then Roosters and Panthers, there's always plenty happening with those two guys, with quality of scoring. So that's that video on those 4 clubs, guys. Let me know what you want to see next from SuperCoach perspective. I've got the next 2 sections that we'll go through, and then we'll slowly go through all of the positions one by one, hooker all the way through to fullback, which will be good fun. So we'll slow and steadily get through everything we need to for SuperCoach at this stage of the season, which will be great. And then we'll get further and further news as things go along. If you're interested in the private group, guys, all of the information is in the description. From a fantasy perspective, I do have SuperCoach content in there as well, my rankings and certain things like that. For fantasy-wise, last year we had the 8th, 9th, 21st, and 26th place finishes in the private group. We've already got number 5 from last year. Riley is in there as well. So all the information is in the description. Check that out, and we'll catch you in the next video.